Hey YouTube, this is the Wheelman282. I'm back with another video, finally. And I've decided that I'm going to start a new video series where I pick up gaming consoles or just other things, other technology that's broken, and I fix it and restore it back to working order. So I'm going to start that series off with my personal Game Boy Color. Now, this Game Boy Color does work. It has batteries. So if I just turn it on, you see that it does work. However, if I take the batteries out here, and I use a DC 3-volt adapter to power it from the wall, no power. So that's a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear this thing down and figure out what the problem is and show you guys how to fix it. Alright, so let's go over some of the tools you're going to need. First off, you're going to need a precision tri-wing screwdriver. You can get these on eBay, Amazon, but you can't really go out and buy them in stores just because they're so uncommon. This is a bit. You can also go on Deal Extreme and get the actual screwdriver, but I'm just going to use the bit, and I'm going to use a hex driver, and it just fits right in there. You're also going to need a precision crosshead or Phillips head screwdriver. And then you're going to need, this is optional, but a precision flathead screwdriver or some sort of poking tool or a scratch awl. Really comes in handy for moving small parts around. Again, not necessary, but it kind of makes your life easier if you have one. Depending on what kind of wire you use, you're going to need either wire strippers or you're going to need a razor blade. I'll be using the razor blade because I'm using a very thin gauge wire, which is this. I think this is like 38 gauge wire, something like that. You can get this out of an Ethernet cable, or you can use an old like IDE or old floppy cable to get this. You just cut the cable and you pull a strand off, and that's your wire. This is very thin wire. It's going to be great for using on the small Game Boy Color motherboard. So you're going to need that. And you're also going to need a soldering iron, solder, and this is optional, but it really helps out. You're going to need flux. This is liquid flux. You can use paste if you want to, but liquid is a little bit easier for this. And you're also going to need a sponge for wiping your soldering iron on to keep it clean. You can make one of these. This is just a little container I made with a sponge, but I cut some grooves in it with a razor blade. So, and you pour water in it and you clean your soldering iron. So, really comes in handy. So this is the tools you're going to need to get this thing fixed. So let's go ahead and take this thing apart. Those other tools I showed you, you're also going to need a multimeter of some kind. It doesn't really matter because we're just testing. We're going to be testing continuity, so it doesn't have to be any precision equipment. So this is just mine. It's just an old Beckman, but it'll work fine. So you're going to need a multimeter as well. Alright, so we're going to take this thing apart. First, removing the gain that might be in there. And next, you have 6 screws to take out. You have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then here in the battery cover, you have 1 and 2. So these 6 screws need to come out. So I'm going to speed up the video and do that for you real quick. Alright, so we got all the screws out. So just simply lift the back of the Game Boy off, like so. And go ahead and take out your power switch too. Just pops right out. And here we have the motherboard of the Game Boy Color. And this is where you need to grab your multimeter, and you need to set it. Let's see if I can show you this. You set it to this little diode symbol here. This means continuity. So we're just going to set that to the continuity setting, and we're going to test which component is bad. And I already know because I've already done this, but I'm going to show you. Alright, so the Game Boy Color has two fuses, one for the batteries and one for the 3 volts in on the DC jack. So, this is kind of difficult to get in focus, but right here, this component here is fuse 1. This is the fuse for the battery, and this component here is fuse 2. This is the fuse for the 3 volt jack. So what we're going to do is we're just going to test the continuity across these two fuses to see which one is bad. Okay, so I've got my multimeter here. I have it set on the continuity set. When I touch the two leads together, the voltage drops to approximately 0. So that's what's going to happen when we test this fuse. So what we're going to do, we're going to test fuse 1 here. Remember, fuse 1 is on the left, and we're just going to put this across the two leads on fuse 1. And as you can see in the multimeter, we have a voltage drop. So that fuse is good. It's conducting electricity properly. Now right here we have fuse 2. So we're going to test the leads on fuse 2. And you see there's no voltage drop. That means there's no continuity between fuse 2. So what we're going to have to do is, there's two options. You can either replace this fuse or you could jumper it. Now I have searched all over the internet trying to find a fuse to replace this with. I've looked up marking charts, repair guides, and I cannot find the voltage or the amperage rating on this fuse. I'm guessing it's 3 volts, but the amperage rating, I have no idea. It just has a 20 on top, and that probably doesn't mean much outside of some sort of conversion chart. So I have to kind of repair this with just a piece of wire, but it's going to work. You just have to, when you do this, you have to make super sure that you don't plug in a voltage higher than 3 volts into your Game Boy Color. If you do, you will destroy your Game Boy Color. So just be warned, if you do this, be extra careful not to use more than 3 volts. So that's what we're going to do. Get this multimeter put up and I'll cut right back to you. Alright, so this is where we're going to measure our wire. So I have my wire here, and I'm just going to make a little horseshoe shape, or a little hook, something like that. And I just want to stick it, or place it near the fuse to see how long it needs to be. And I'm just going to hold it with my thumb right there, and take your wire snips or cutters or whatever, and you're just going to snip it off, and there we have our little jumper. So next, depending on what wire you use, you can use this, but the smallest wire stripping setting on this is too small for this wire. So you're going to need a razor blade to get this to strip this wire. So just hold it between your fingers like this and use your thumbnail as a guide on the side of the blade. So you're going to need approximately, you don't need much, about that much will be fine. So we're just going to use the razor blade to go around the casing of the wire, and just going to pull it off with our fingers. So I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to wait so long. Alright, so there's one wire exposed. See it there? And now we're just going to do the other side. And there's the other side. So, pretty easy. Just be careful not to cut yourself. But if you use your thumbnail as a guide, you can't really. So, there's our jumper wire. And what we're going to do next is we're going to tin this wire so we can attach it to the circuit board. So we've got my soldering iron here. Got our jumper wire and our solder. So what we're going to do, we're just going to put a little bit of solder on the tip here. Doesn't take much. And we're just going to place our wire onto the tip, and we're just going to flow solder onto the wire. Just so it'll stick to the circuit board. So this is what we're going to do. Just like that. That side is tinned. And then we're going to do the opposite side. Just like that. So both sides are tinned. And so at this point, just take your sponge and just, you have this blob of solder on your iron here. Just get rid of that. Just clean your iron a little bit, like so. And yeah. Alright, so I've got my wire bent into it like a little horseshoe shape. And you can see that I've bent the leads up just like that. So this is the form we're going to use to attach to our fuse right here. Alright, so this is the time to solder in our jumper wire. So I've just straightened it out a little bit to help me work with it. And this is where your solder is going to come, your flux is going to come in handy. So just get your flux ready. You don't need much at all. Again, liquid helps if you have it. And what you're going to do is you're just going to put it on both sides of this fuse. So just going to put it right there on that side. And right here on this side. A little bit more on this side. And you want it on the contacts on both sides of that fuse. So that's your flux application. Probably won't need that anymore. Sorry, first take your soldering iron. And you're just going to put a little bit of solder on the tip. Doesn't take much. Then you're going to take your jumper wire here. And you're just going to solder it to one side of this fuse. So again, I put the wire in an L shape just so it'll lay flat. Put it on this side of the fuse. Tack it in. Yeah, that's a good joint. And then this is where we do our best to form this into that horseshoe shape I was talking about. Just use a little tool as a fulcrum and just bend this down the best you can. And this can be a little bit tedious, but it's okay. Alright, so it's in its basic shape. So I'm just going to use this tool to hold the wire down onto the soldering, or onto the pad. I'm going to use my soldering iron to just tack it in. Like so. And there you go. Now let's check our work. You can see here, this side is tacked in properly, and also this side is tacked in properly. And also, just bring it up to your face real close. Make sure it's not touching any other components or any other solder pads. So again, we're going to take our multimeter and we're just going to check this fuse that we just jumpered, just to make sure that we have connectivity. So we're going to place it on this side, place on this side. And you see there that we have a voltage drop. So that's excellent. Our jumper worked. Our Game Boy should power on. Again, make sure you're using the correct rating on the on your power supply. This says output 3 volts DC, 200 milliamps. So make sure you're using this voltage and this amount of amperage. Otherwise, you can destroy your Game Boy Color since there is no fuse. So again, a warning. So we're just going to plug this in to the we'll plug this in and see if it turns on. And it does. So our jumper worked. Excellent. Alright, so at this point the Game Boy Color is fixed. However, if you're using a used Game Boy Color and it hasn't been cleaned in the past, it might be wise to go ahead and get this thing cleaned up. So that's what I'm going to do. This is already clean, but I'm going to show you how to do it. You have 3 screws here on the motherboard, 3 Phillips head screws or crosshead. You just need to take those out real quick. Okay, so the 3 screws are out. Also, you're going to need to disconnect your ribbon cable here for the screen. So you have 2 locks on either side of this. You're just going to pull the locks out with your thumbnail or preferably not a screwdriver. You don't want to slip and damage anything. I'm just going to pull these 2 locks out. Like so. And lift the motherboard out and just pop that out. And your speaker is going to come with it. So here you have the other side of the motherboard. Go ahead and clean the dust off your speaker. Clean your pads with your cotton swab and some 91% isopropyl alcohol. And also you have your rubber contacts for your directional pad A and B and your select and start. Again, I've already cleaned these, but metal residue can build up on these contacts. So just scrub them off with your Q-tip and alcohol, and clean any dust off of them, just so they make better contact. A little bit of dust there, but yeah, once you do that, just reassemble it. It's pretty easy to do. Take your motherboard, stick it in the ribbon cable in the slot first, so it sits just like that, and then make sure your speaker falls in its little compartment correctly. It could be sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get it to fall, but there it went. Yeah. And then you have to release the tension on the buttons to get this to fall in properly. But it should just pop right in. And you can't really lay this on a flat surface and put these screws back in, because it pushes the buttons and it pushes the motherboard up. So you have to hold it with your hand and then put your screws back in. So that's what I'm going to do. Alright, so there's the motherboard put back in. We're going to need to lock our ribbon cable in, so just make sure it's firmly seated, and then you use your 2 fingers to pop the lock down. Just like that. Alright. Next, take your the rear of your Game Boy. Take your power switch here. I'm just going to put it back in. It just doesn't even pop in. It just like lays there. And then take your compartment at the back of your Game Boy, and if there's any dust, if this is a clear Game Boy like this is, clean out any dust. Also on the front side too, if there's any dust, you know, clean that out so you can't see it. If it's a solid color, you know, you don't have to worry about it. But just pop that right in there, like so. Alright, and then we're going to put our tri-wing screws back in. Alright, so sometimes it can be a little frustrating. You see I dropped the screw there twice. So again, we're just going to plug in our socket, and this should work. And it works. Excellent. So put our battery cover on, and that is how you fix a dead Game Boy. This goes for either fuse inside. If fuse 1 is bad, that controls the battery, you can jumper that as well. If fuse 2 is bad, where it controls the DC input, you can jumper that as well. So either fuse, you can jumper to, if that's the problem, you can bring your dead Game Boy back to life. So thank everybody for watching. I'll be making more of these. I've got some things lined up, so just stay tuned.